A few important pieces to know about class from February 14th. First of all, as we move, when we look at the ideas of lost and found, Hashavat Avedah, and as we move from the Torah to the Mishnah to the Talmud, I think it's important to kind of ask ourselves the question, what are the assumptions that we can make about others, and how does that change from the Torah to the Mishnah and the Talmud? Because in the Torah, we've really learned that what we can assume is that if we find a lost object, someone is always going to be looking for it and always wants it back. Someone is always going to try to make effort to find it. And someone firmly believes that when they find their object, they're going to be able to identify it in a way that the finder himself can or herself can feel good about giving that a lost object back to the loser himself, saying that is actually the person who lost that object, and it's not someone who's trying in some way to hoodwink me. We're going to see that as those assumptions change as we move from the Mishnah to the Talmud. So here we are in the Mishnah itself, and we use these words mitziot shelo and chayav la'akriz. Mitziot shelo meaning his findings, meaning something he found that he can keep. Chayav la'akriz is he's obligated to announce. These are the things that if found, the finder must announce chayav lakriz, and these are things that if the finder finds it, it's mitziot shelo. And then the Talmud is now, the Mishnah is now going to say these are the things that the finder found. The finder is mitziot shelo, is allowed to keep. Interesting enough, the next Mishnah doesn't talk about things you're allowed to keep. We've exhausted those here. But the next Mishnah is talking about these are the things one is obligated to announce. So here we're dealing with just stuff that you are allowed to have. You can own these things. So if the finder found a scattered fruit, peirot mefuzarim, or if he found money, ma'ot mefuzarot, those are things that he can actually keep. If the finder found a loaf of bread in the public place, finder found baked loaves of bread, strings of fish, pieces of meat, all these things the finder can actually keep. And these are the words of Rabbi Meir. And then Rabbi Yehuda says, all things that have a shinui, anything that has some type of change in it, we are chayav lakriz, we're obligated to announce. Ketzad, what does that mean? Tell me a practical application of that. How is this so? If a finder found a round cake and there was a piece of pottery in it, or if the finder found a loaf of bread and there was money in it, those are things that you would be chayav lakriz. You would be obligated to announce them because those things are considered manipulated and have kind of a shinui, meaning those are things that someone who came to you could say, hey, I lost something and I can prove it because I've manipulated it in some way. Rabbi Shima, and that's kind of called a siman. Those are simans. Those are ways that we can kind of retrieve them because we know something special about that object. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says all vessels that are emporium vessels, you are you are chayav lakriz. You're not able to keep. You're chayav lakriz. You're obligated to announce. So, of course, the Talmud is going to ask, what is an emporia vessel? And interestingly enough, they look at this word emporia, which is probably a Greek word, and they say, oh, I have no idea what that word means, but here's how I can understand it. I can understand it by taking it apart to three words, ein po ri'ah. Ein po ri'ah. There is here no evidence. There is no here evidence, meaning this is an object where there's no siman, there's no evidence that you can prove it, meaning it is a completely new object, and which so that's why we have supermarkets that are called the Emporium. Emporium meaning all the objects here are completely brand new. By the way, this idea of being able to take apart a word to understand what that word means is a technique called notaricon, where we take apart words. And here's another famous example of that, where it says the Egyptians worked the Israelites bifarech. And the rabbis ask, what is that word? I've never seen that word before. Bifarech. Oh, and so they take it apart. They say, oh, bi, with, pe, mouth, rach, tender. Oh, with a tender mouth. So meaning the Egyptians, they kind of enticed the Israelites with like words of praise and with words of gratitude to start working for them. And then all of a sudden they clamped down and really got got busy on making slavery a reality. So that's called no tarikan. So before we move on to our Talmud piece, there's a Talmud piece, a very famous story that comes actually very close to the last thing we studied about Shabbat, and this is called Joseph the Sabbath lovers. So we here's the story itself, but here I've also kind of written it down. It's a very famous story, and the question after you read it is to ask yourself: has Yosef, according to the Mishnah, violated the laws of Hashavat Avedah? Yes or no? And and now we kind of are moving on to our Talmud, and we began with the end in mind, meaning the very last word of the first Talmud piece we're going to be studying about Hashavat Avedah is the word Teyku. Now, what does that word Teyku mean? Oh, first of all, so here's the page that we're going to study. There's the Mishnah up there. There's the Gemara piece, and there's that word with the black arrow, Teyku. What does that mean? So, if we were in America, you might see a newspaper article that said this: Wildcat Wesleyan game a tie, declares referees in a statement. But if this same thing happened in Israel, the paper would say Wildcats Wesleyan game a Teyku, declares the referees in a statement. So the word Teyku means tie, or we can't figure out who is the winner. You're right and you're right. Teyku. But the rabbis have actually thought that actually each letter in the word Teyku, like TVT, is an acronym meaning Tarbut v'Torah. Teyku is also an acronym. Teyku means the Tishbite Yitaretz will actually solve Kushiot and Bayot. Will solve the problems and the problems. So who's the Tishbite? Well, if you remember that famous song, Eliyahu HaNavi, Eliyahu Ha. That's right, Tishbi. Eliyahu is the Tishbite we're talking about. So they're saying Eliyahu will come and will solve this problem, meaning it's a tie right now. So we're waiting for Elijah to come and who will give us the true answers. Now, how is it that Elijah has become kind of thought of as the person who answers all these great questions? Well, first of all, we know Elijah comes when we open the door for Havdalah. We know Elijah comes when a male baby has a circumcision. We know Elijah comes during our Passover Seder. So how does Elijah get this reputation? Well, first of all, Elijah has never died, right? It says in the Tanakh that Elijah had went up to heaven in a fiery chariot. So he's actually around to answer questions that have a stalemate. But also, we have a Mishnah, Mav Mishnah, that says the following: I received this tradition from Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, that he heard from his rabbi, and his rabbi from his rabbi, that it is law that was given from God to Moshe at Mount Sinai, that the only reason that Elijah comes is to push away those who are near and bring close those who are far. Rabbi Yehuda said the only reason why Elijah comes is only to bring those who are far, but not to push away. Rabbi Shimon says Elijah comes to settle machlokets, meaning settle disagreements. And there we have it, right? In this mission itself, Elijah is known by Rabbi Shimon and I guess by other rabbis in the world that he comes to settle disputes. Now, interestingly enough, and this is what we ended with today, we know something that happens. We can use this information in a very interesting way because we know on Passover we drink 4 cups of wine. But we also know that there is another cup of wine that's on that table that we call Kos Shel Eliyahu. That kos is sitting there at the table. We open up the door, and we are looking to see, after we invite Elijah in, is Elijah drinking that cup of wine that we're calling Kos Shel Elijah or not? So now that we know that Elijah comes to settle disagreements, what might we think is happening with this cup of wine? Oh my goodness. Now that we know this, there was a Teyku. There was a stalemate about a question of, do we drink a 5th cup of wine on Pesach or not? And surprise, surprise, Rabbi Tarfon in the Talmud says that actually we say after we drink our 4th cup of wine, we drink another cup of wine over the prayer, the great Hallel called Ki Olam Chasto, Ki Olam Chasto. And because of that, we kind of wonder, should we drink this 5th cup of wine or should we not? So, here's a brilliant idea. Let's put a cup on the table, fill it with a fifth cup of wine. Let's see, let's open the door for Elijah. Let's see if Elijah drinks that cup of wine. If Elijah does, that means that we should all be drinking a fifth cup of wine. Elijah has solved the machloket of whether we should have 4 cups or 5 cups. And if Elijah does not drink that fifth cup of wine, then Elijah is saying you don't drink it. And Elijah also has solved the problem of the machloket. So, and I said in class, and for Emily, if you're watching this video, I will say that from this point on, I am allowing every quiz we take from this point on, that if you don't know an answer, you can always write the word Teyku, and right, which means I don't know the answer, but if Elijah were here, he would come and help me with the answer, and I will count that towards as a full credit for that question. So Teyku can help you take quizzes in the future, although Emily, you need no help because you always get 100.